You think the scariest part of surgery is the knife, but for me, it was what happened while I was asleep. My parents used those 3 hours to sell my $425,000 condo out from under me. They told me they were handling the paperwork to help, but by the time the anesthesia wore off, I was technically homeless, and the people I trusted most had already cashed the check. The condo was the first thing in my life that felt entirely mine. It was a corner unit on the fourth floor of a restored brick building in downtown Larkhaven, with oversized windows that caught the morning light and held it hostage against the gray carpet until noon. I had bought it 3 years ago for $425,000, a number that still made my chest tighten with a mixture of pride and terror whenever I said it aloud. It was a stretch, but it was my stretch. Every payment I made was a brick in a wall I was building between the woman I was becoming and the child my parents were determined to keep me as. I was 33 years old. I had a senior title at a logistics firm, a credit score that hovered near perfect, and a 401k that was fully vested. Yet, whenever the phone rang and the caller ID flashed Mom and Dad, I reverted instantly to a teenager hiding a report card. Margot and Dennis Perez did not believe in boundaries. They believed in engulfment. They called it love. They called it family. But it felt like drowning in warm syrup. If I didn't answer within 3 rings, my mother would text. If I didn't answer the text, my father would drive over to check on the car. They framed this surveillance as essential care, implying that without them, my life would inevitably collapse into chaos. So when the doctor told me I needed surgery, my first instinct was not fear of the procedure, but fear of telling them. It was a structural issue, something internal that had been twisting slowly for months, causing sharp, blinding spikes of pain that left me breathless in meetings. The specialist said it was routine but necessary. The recovery would be 6 weeks. I would need help for the first few days. I tried to manage it quietly. I lined up a friend, Sarah, to drive me. I prepped meals. I scrubbed the condo until it gleamed, wanting to return to a sanctuary of order. But I slipped up. I mentioned the date during a Sunday dinner, and the wall I had built crumbled. "We are taking care of you," my mother announced, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. She was already reaching for her calendar, aggressive red pen in hand. "I do not need you to take time off work." I tried to say, "Sarah can drive me. Sarah is not family," my father said, cutting his steak with precise, violent strokes. "Family takes care of family. Bella, do not be ridiculous. You will be under anesthesia. You need someone responsible to make decisions if things go wrong." The guilt was a physical weight, heavy and familiar. I let them take over because it was easier than fighting them. And because a small, treacherous part of me was scared. I was scared of the knife. I was scared of the pain. I wanted my mommy and daddy, even if their version of comfort always came with a suffocating price tag. The week leading up to the surgery was a blur of anxiety and paperwork. My parents were everywhere. They were in my kitchen, reorganizing my cabinets because they did not make sense. They were asking for spare keys. They were demanding the contact information for my surgeon, my primary care physician, and my boss. On the morning of the surgery, the air in the pre-op holding area was frigid. I was wearing a thin hospital gown that smelled of industrial bleach, shivering under a heated blanket that was rapidly losing its warmth. The fourth in my hand throbbed. My parents were flanking the bed like sentries. My father was pacing, checking his watch every 30 seconds. My mother was shuffling through a stack of papers in her oversized tote bag. "We need to get this sorted before they take you back," she said. She pulled out a clipboard. I blinked at her, my head already swimming from the mild sedative the nurse had given me 10 minutes ago to take the edge off my panic. "What is that?" "Just insurance forms, Bella," my father said, stopping his pacing to loom over the bed. "In case there are complications, we need to make sure we can authorize billing transfers so you do not get hit with out-of-network fees. You know how predatory these hospitals are." I tried to focus on the text, but the letters were swimming. It looked like standard boilerplate legal jargon, paragraphs of dense text about liability and authorization. "Sign here," my mother said, pointing a manicured fingernail at a line at the bottom of the page. And here. I scribbled my name. My hand felt heavy, disconnected from my wrist. And this one? She said, flipping the page. This is for the release of information. I signed again. As I lay back, closing my eyes to escape the spinning sensation in the room, I heard the distinctive click of a camera shutter. I peeled one eye open. My mother was holding her phone over the papers I had just signed, snapping a picture. "Why are you taking photos?" I slurred. The words felt thick in my mouth. "For the records." "Honey," she said, her voice bright and brittle. "Just so we have a copy if they lose the originals. You know how incompetent administration can be." She flipped another page. I saw a signature line that was already blank, but she adjusted the paper so it caught the light. The camera clicked again. Something about it felt wrong. Why would she need a photo of a document I had just signed? Why was she moving so fast? But the nurse walked in then. A tall woman with kind eyes and a syringe that promised oblivion. "Time to go." "Bella," the nurse said. I looked at my parents. My father was already putting the papers into his briefcase. My mother was smiling, but her eyes were not on me. They were on the briefcase. "We will be right here when you wake up," my mother said. "Do not worry about a thing. We have handled everything." The darkness came down like a curtain, heavy and absolute. Waking up was not like in the movies. There was no sudden snap to consciousness. There was a slow, agonizing crawl through a swamp of nausea and pain. My abdomen felt like it had been carved out with a rusted spoon. The beeping of the monitor was a drill directly into my temple. I opened my eyes and saw the white ceiling tiles. Then I saw them. Margot and Dennis were sitting in the chairs by the window. They were leaning toward each other, whispering furiously. As soon as I stirred, they snapped apart. "She is awake," my mother said. She stood up too quickly, smoothing her skirt. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright with an energy that seemed out of place in a recovery room. "Hi," I croaked. My throat was sandpaper. "Do not try to talk," my father said. Rushing to the bedside, he patted my arm, his touch jarringly firm. "You did great. The doctor said everything went perfectly. I need water," I whispered. My mother held a cup with a straw to my lips. "Drink slowly." I took a sip. The water was cold and sharp. I looked at them properly. They did not look like worried parents who had just watched their daughter go through major surgery. They looked exhilarated. They looked like they had just gotten away with something. "How long was I out?" I asked. "About 4 hours," my father said. "You guys okay?" "You look—" "We are just so relieved," my mother interrupted, her voice slightly too loud. "We were so worried, but now it is over. You just need to focus on healing. That is your only job now. Focus on healing. We handled everything else I asked. The drug haze making me slow. What else was there?" "Just logistics, Bella," my father said dismissively. "Insurance, the discharge papers. Do not worry your pretty head about it. They took me home 2 days later. Not to my home, but to theirs. We are not letting you go back to that condo alone." My mother insisted. "You cannot even lift a milk jug. You are staying in your old room until the doctor clears you to drive." I was too weak to argue. The pain meds made me pliable, and the thought of navigating my stairs was impossible. So I let them drive me to the suburbs, to the house I had grown up in. A place that smelled of potpourri and unspoken expectations. For a week, I existed in a twilight state. I slept. I ate the bland soup my mother brought me, and I watched daytime television. My phone lay on the nightstand, largely ignored. I checked my work emails once, saw that my out-of-office reply was working, and put it away. It was on the 7th day that the fog began to lift. I was sitting up in bed, the pain finally receding to a manageable, dull ache. I remembered that it was the 1st of the month. My HOA fees. I was meticulous about my bills. I had never missed a payment in my life. I reached for my laptop, wincing as I twisted my torso, and logged into the property management portal for my building. The screen refreshed. A red banner appeared at the top. "Account disabled." I frowned. I retyped my password. Maybe I had fat-fingered it. Account disabled. No active unit associated with this user ID. I stared at the screen. That made no sense. I tried the forgot password link. It told me my email address was not found in the system. A prickle of irritation worked its way up my spine. The management company was notorious for their terrible software updates. I picked up my phone and dialed the customer service number saved in my contacts. "Thank you for calling Larkhaven Properties," a bored voice said after 3 minutes of hold music. "This is Jessica." "Hi, Jessica. This is Bella Perez. I am in Unit 404 at the Lofts on Main. I am trying to pay my monthly dues, but the portal says my account is disabled." "1 second. Let me pull that up," she said. I heard the clacking of a keyboard. "Perez." "Yes, Perez. I am not seeing a Bella Perez in 404, Jessica said. I let out a short, incredulous laugh. "That is impossible. I have lived there for 3 years. Let me check the unit history," she said. The typing continued. "Ah, I see it. The account was closed out last week." "Closed out? What do you mean?" "Closed out. The unit was sold," Jessica said. "We received the transfer documents on the 30th. The new owner is listed as, let me see, Obsidian Holdings, LLC. The room suddenly felt very cold. The 30th. That was the day of my surgery. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice trembling. "I did not sell my condo. I am sitting here telling you I own it. I am just looking at the system." "Ma'am," Jessica said, her tone shifting from bored to defensive. "It says the deed transfer was recorded. You would need to take that up with the county. We just managed the building." I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. This was a glitch. It had to be a data entry error. Someone at the county clerk's office had typed in the wrong parcel number. It happened. I had heard horror stories about things like this. I navigated to the county recorder's website. My fingers felt numb as I typed in my address. 124 Main Street, Unit 404. The search results loaded. There it was. The most recent entry. Document type warranty deed. Grantor Bella Marie Perez. Grantee Obsidian Holdings, LLC. Date recorded. January 30th, 2026. Consideration $425,000. I stared at the screen until the pixels blurred. The date was the 30th. The exact day I was lying on an operating table, unconscious. I looked at the grantor name again. Bella Marie Perez. My name. My stomach turned over. I felt like I was going to be sick. The only way a deed could be transferred was if I signed it. But I hadn't signed anything, except the memory flashed in my mind like a strobe light. The cold pre-op room, my mother's clipboard, the stack of papers, just insurance forms. Honey, the sound of the camera shutter. I grabbed my phone and opened my banking app. I logged in, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My mortgage account. It usually showed a balance of nearly $300,000. It showed 0. Paid in full. I clicked on the transaction history. On January 30th, a wire transfer had paid off the mortgage. I went to my checking account. I expected to see the difference, the equity. If the condo sold for $425,000 and I owed $300,000, there should be over $100,000 sitting in my account. There was nothing. Just my normal balance of $4,000. I called the bank. I bypassed the automated system, jamming the 0 button until I got a human. "I need to know where the proceeds from a mortgage payoff went," I said, my voice sounding shrill in the quiet bedroom. Security verification took 5 minutes that felt like 5 years. Finally, the banker came back on the line. "It looks like the surplus funds were wired to an external account at the time of closing." The banker said, "What account?" I demanded. "The beneficiary is listed as the Perez Family Management Trust." The air left my lungs. Perez Family Management. My parents. I lowered the phone. I looked around the room I had grown up in. The faded debate team ribbons on the wall. The stuffed bear on the shelf. It was a museum of my childhood, preserved by people who claimed to love me more than life itself. They had sold my home. while I was cut open on a table, bleeding. They had sold my home and taken the money. I threw the covers off. Pain ripped through my incision, hot and jagged, but I didn't care. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and stood up. The world tilted. Gray spots dancing in my vision. I grabbed the dresser to steady myself. I walked out of the room. I walked down the hallway, the carpet rough under my bare feet. I could hear them in the kitchen. The smell of frying onions and garlic wafted up the stairs. It was a smell that used to mean safety. Now it smelled like a trap. I walked into the kitchen. My mother was at the stove, stirring a pot of sauce. My father was at the table, reading the newspaper and cleaning his glasses with a microfiber cloth. They looked so normal, so terrifyingly normal. "Bella," my mother said, turning around with a smile that faltered when she saw my face. "Honey, you should not be out of bed. You need your rest." I stood in the doorway, clutching the doorframe for support. I was wearing oversized sweatpants and a t-shirt stained with sweat. I must have looked like a ghost. "You sold my condo," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was the bubbling of the tomato sauce. My father stopped cleaning his glasses. He put them on slowly, peering at me. "What are you talking about?" he asked. "I saw the deed." I said, my voice gaining strength. "I saw the bank records. You sold my condo to Obsidian Holdings on the day of my surgery. You paid off the mortgage, and you wired the rest of the money to yourselves." My mother turned off the stove. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, her movements deliberate. "Bella, please sit down," she said. "You are pale. You are confused." "I am not confused," I shouted. The exertion made my stitches pull, and I gasped. "Do not tell me I'm confused. Did you or did you not sell my apartment?" My father stood up. He walked over to me, his face arranging itself into an expression of pity. "We had to. Bella, it was an emergency." "An emergency?" I stared at him. "What emergency?" "There was a surprise medical bill," my mother said, coming to stand beside him. "A complication with the insurance. They were going to deny the claim. We were looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. We had to act fast to protect your credit." "That is a lie," I said. "I checked my insurance portal yesterday. The surgery was covered. The deductible is $5,000. I have that in savings." "No, you do not understand," my father said, his voice dropping to that reasonable, condescending tone he used when I was a teenager. It was a pre-authorization issue. If we had not liquidated the asset, they were going to put a lien on everything. We did it to save you. "It is just temporary," my mother added quickly. "We can buy it back once the dust settles. We just moved the money to the family trust for safekeeping. We were going to tell you when you were stronger. We didn't want to upset you while you were healing." I looked at them. I looked at the tears welling up in my mother's eyes. I looked at the stoic concern on my father's face. I knew my finances. I knew my insurance. There was no bill. There was no lien. "You forged my signature," I whispered. "That morning, the insurance papers. You slipped the deed in there." "Bella, stop it," my mother said, a tear rolling down her cheek. "You are hurting us. After everything we have done for you, we spent days by your bedside. We cleaned up your vomit. We saved you from financial ruin. And this is how you thank us. You are accusing us of crimes. You are confused from the anesthesia," my father said firmly. "It has side effects. Paranoia is one of them. Go back to bed. We will discuss this when you are rational." I watched them. I watched how seamless it was. The pivot from accused to victim. The rewriting of reality. They were doing what they had always done. If I said the sky was blue, and they wanted it to be green, they would argue until I doubted my own eyes. They would cry until I apologized for seeing blue. But this wasn't about the color of the sky. This was my home. This was $425,000. I realized then that I was not talking to parents who had made a mistake. I was talking to architects who had been planning a demolition. "I am not going back to bed," I said. I turned around and walked out of the kitchen. "Bella, come back here," my father shouted. I grabbed my purse from the hook by the door. My car keys were missing, of course they were, but my phone was in my pocket. I walked out the front door. The suburban silence hit me. I walked to the end of the driveway and called a rideshare. My mother came out onto the porch. "Bella, please, you are not well." I did not look back. I got into the car when it arrived 3 minutes later. "Take me to the DoubleTree Hotel downtown," I told the driver. As the car pulled away, I watched my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror. I felt a strange sensation. It was not just anger. It was not just fear. It was a breaking, a clean, sharp snap of a tether I hadn't realized was wrapped around my throat. I checked into the hotel using my credit card. I lay down on the stiff hotel bed, staring at the stucco ceiling. My body was throbbing with pain, but my mind was crystal clear. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a family dispute. My parents had stolen my house. I reached for my phone. I did not call my best friend. I did not call my boss. I searched for legal aid Larkhaven real estate fraud. I found a number for a firm called Jameson and Associates. I dialed Jameson and Associates. A receptionist answered. "I need to speak to a lawyer," I said. My voice was steady, colder than I had ever heard it. "What is the nature of your inquiry, real estate theft?" I said. "And who is the opposing party?" I closed my eyes. I pictured Margot and Dennis in their warm, onion-scented kitchen, convincing themselves they were the heroes of this story. "My parents," I said. The next morning, I sat in the waiting room of the legal aid office. The chairs were mismatched vinyl, and the coffee table was piled with magazines from 3 years ago. I was wearing the same sweatpants I had fled in, but I had washed my face and tied my hair back. I was terrified. A part of me, the part that was still 5 years old and wanted my mother's approval, was screaming that I was making a mistake, that I was blowing this out of proportion, that maybe there really was a medical bill I didn't know about, that I was betraying the only people who would ever truly love me. But then I thought about the condo. I thought about the light in the morning. I thought about the portal saying account disabled. I thought about the smile on my mother's face as she took a photo of my signature while I was drugged. Ms. Perez. I looked up. A woman in a sharp navy blazer was standing in the doorway. She looked tired, but sharp, holding a file folder. "I am Elena Ross," she said. "Come on back." I followed her into a small office. I sat down. "Tell me what happened," she said. I took a deep breath. I told her everything. The surgery, the papers, the deed, the wire transfer. When I finished, Elena Ross did not look at me with pity. She did not ask if I was sure. She did not suggest family counseling. She opened her laptop and started typing furiously. "This is not a civil dispute. Ms. Perez," she said. Her eyes locked on the screen. "If what you are saying is true, this is grand larceny. This is forgery. This is a complex fraud scheme." She stopped typing and looked at me. "You need to understand something right now," she said. "The people who did this to you are not acting as your parents. They are acting as adverse parties in a major financial crime. If you want to get your home back, you have to stop thinking of them as family and start thinking of them as defendants. Can you do that?" I looked at her. I felt the tears finally spill over, hot and stinging. I wiped them away with the back of my hand. I remembered my father cleaning his glasses. I remembered my mother's performance in the kitchen. "Yes," I said, "I can." "Then let's get to work," Elena said. We spent the next hour drafting an emergency motion. Elena explained that we needed to file a lis pendens, immediately a notice of pending legal action to cloud the title and prevent the LLC from reselling the condo to someone else. "We need the original documents," Elena said. "We need to see exactly what they made you sign. Did they give you copies?" "No." I said, "Okay, we will request them. But first, we need to stop the bleeding. Do you have any other assets? Any other accounts they might have access to?" I don't think so," I said. "Just my 401K. But that is locked down." "Good. Change all your passwords. Today, right now. Call the credit bureaus and freeze your credit." I nodded, making a list on a yellow legal pad. "One more thing," Elena said. She leaned back in her chair, studying me. "You mentioned they transferred the money to a Perez Family Management Trust. Yes. Have you ever heard of that trust before? No, never. Trusts don't just appear out of thin air, Elena said. They have grantors, trustees, beneficiaries. If they move the money there, it means the trust already existed. What does that mean? I asked. It means, Elena said, tapping her pen on the desk, that this might not be the first time they have used your name to move assets around. A chill went through me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I left the office an hour later with a folder full of documents and an instruction sheet. I felt hollowed out, but for the first time since waking up from surgery, I felt solid. I stood on the sidewalk outside the law office. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Bella, please come home. Dad is crying. We are so worried about you. We made your favorite soup. Let's just talk about this calmly. We love you. I looked at the words. Dad is crying. We love you. It was a hook, baited with guilt. Yesterday. I would have bitten. Yesterday. I would have gone back, apologized for yelling, and let them explain why selling my home was actually a favor. I typed a reply. Please direct all future communication to my attorney. Elena Ross. I hit send. Then I blocked the number. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The silence of the phone was absolute. It was terrifying. It was lonely. But it was mine. I put the phone in my pocket and hailed a cab. I had to go to the bank. I had to go to the credit bureau. I had a war to fight. And I was starting with a deficit of $425,000 and 2 parents. As the cab merged into traffic, I looked out the window at the skyline of Larkhaven. Somewhere in that city, in a building I loved, strangers were walking on my floors. They were looking out my windows. I was going to get it back, no matter what it cost, no matter who I had to destroy, even if I had to destroy the people who made me. The office of Elena Ross smelled faintly of stale coffee and very expensive toner. It was a smell that I would come to associate with the dismantling of my life. Elena sat across from me, her hands clasped on top of a legal pad that was already covered in sharp, angular shorthand. She was not a comforting woman. She was a mechanic of disasters, and I was currently a totaled vehicle on her lift. To transfer a deed in this state, Elena said, her voice dry and precise. You need one of 2 things. You need the grantor that is you to stand in front of a notary, show ID, and sign the document. Or, you need a valid power of attorney that grants an agent the specific authority to conduct real estate transactions on your behalf. She paused, letting the words settle in the air between us like dust motes. I did not sign a deed. I said, I was unconscious. Then we are looking at a power of attorney. Elena said. My stomach dropped. The phrase power of attorney sounded heavy, archaic. It sounded like something you gave to a spouse when you were deploying for war, or to a child when you were too old to remember your own name. I never gave them power of attorney. I said. Elena looked at me over the rim of her glasses. Are you sure? Think back, not just the day of the surgery, any time in the last few years. Did you sign a durable power of attorney, a financial management agreement? I shook my head. No, I handle my own money. They have never had access. Then they forged it, Elena said flatly, or they tricked you into signing it. Either way, the title company accepted it, and that is where we start. She pushed a list of tasks toward me. I need the closing file. Bella, I can subpoena it. But that takes time. As the seller of record, you have a right to a copy. Call the title company. Go there if you have to. Get the file. Specifically, get the instrument they use to authorize the signature. I walked out of her office with a mission. It felt better than the helpless rage that had kept me awake all night in the hotel room. I had a task. I sat in my car, a reliable sedan that I suddenly worried my parents might try to repossess, and called my mother. I had unblocked her number for this specific purpose, a strategic opening of the gates. She answered on the first ring. Bella. Oh, thank God. Where are you? We have been sick with worry. Her voice was thick with tears, a performance of maternal distress that made my teeth ache. I need the closing documents for the condo sale, I said, cutting through her noise. There was a pause, a hesitation that spoke louder than any sob. "Why do you need those?" she asked, her voice shifting, becoming cautious. "I need to see the terms of the sale. Mom, I need to understand what happened. You do not need to worry about the paperwork," she said, her tone soothing, like she was talking a jumper down from a ledge. "Dad has it all in a safe place. It is complicated legal stuff. You are still recovering. Let us handle the administration. I am not asking you to handle it. I am asking for the file. I can send you a summary," she said. "I will type up a breakdown of the numbers. I do not want a summary. I want the copies of the signed documents, the deed, the settlement statement. Well, the originals are at the title office," she said, her voice tightening. "We just have some rough copies. Packets, some pages are missing. It is a mess." "Really? Bella, you are stressing yourself out over nothing. Send me what you have," I said. She sent me a PDF 10 minutes later. It was a joke. It was 3 pages of a settlement statement with the signature lines cropped out, and a generic brochure about the benefits of selling to a cash buyer. They were stalling. They were hiding the smoking gun. I drove to the title company. It was a glass building in the financial district, the kind of place that projected transparency while facilitating secrets. The receptionist looked at me with polite confusion when I gave my name. "I am sorry, Ms. Perez, but that file is archived. It was closed yesterday," I said, leaning on the counter. I could feel the stitches in my abdomen pulling, a sharp reminder of my physical weakness. "It is not archived. I am the seller. I want to see the closing file." She typed something, frowned, and picked up the phone. A moment later, a man in a cheap suit walked out. He introduced himself as the branch manager. "Ms. Perez," he said, his smile tight. "We usually provide copies at the closing table. Your representatives took the package." "My representatives." I repeated. "Your parents," he said. "Mr. and Mrs. Perez. I want my own copy. Now." He hesitated. There was a flicker of something in his eyes. Annoyance, maybe, or wariness. He knew something about this transaction was off. I could smell it on him. "I will see what I can print," he said. He left me in the lobby for 20 minutes. When he returned, he handed me a thick manila envelope. "Everything is in there," he said. "Have a nice day." I did not have a nice day. I took the envelope to my car and tore it open. I flipped past the settlement statement. I flipped past the tax forms. I found it at the bottom of the stack. Durable power of attorney. I stared at the document. It was dated January 14th, 2 weeks before my surgery. I read the text. It was a sweeping grant of authority. It gave Margot and Dennis Perez the power to sell, lease, mortgage, and manage my real estate. It gave them access to my bank accounts. It gave them the right to bind me to contracts. I looked at the bottom of the page. There was a signature, Bella Marie Perez. I brought the paper closer to my face. My breath caught in my throat. It looked like my signature. It had the same loop on the B, the same sharp Z at the end, but it was too perfect. It lacked the slight rush, the tiny inconsistencies of a hand moving naturally across paper. It looked like someone had studied my signature for hours, practiced it on scrap paper until they could replicate the muscle memory, and then drawn it here with careful, deliberate strokes. It was a forgery, but it was a masterful one. I looked at the notary stamp. Prestige Mobile Notary Services, commissioned in the state of... I pulled out my phone and searched for the company. The website was a single page, poorly designed, with a stock photo of a gavel and a phone number. I dialed the number. Prestige. A man's voice answered. Gruff. Distracted. "I am calling about a notarization you performed on January 14th. I said, "For Bella Perez." "Who is this?" "This is Bella Perez." Silence. Then a click. He had hung up on me. I called back. It went straight to voicemail. I sat in the scorching heat of the car. The engine off. Sweating through my shirt. They had planned this. This was not a panic decision made because of a surprise medical bill. They had drafted this document 2 weeks before I went under the knife. They had found a crooked notary. They had practiced my name. They had been planning to sell my home while I was still telling them what I wanted for dinner. I drove back to the hotel. I felt dirty. I felt violated in a way that had nothing to do with my body and everything to do with my identity. My name was the only thing I truly owned, and they had stolen it. I called my parents again. "We need to talk." I said, "Come home." "Bella." My mother said, "No, I have the file. I have the power of attorney." The silence on the other end was different this time. It was not the silence of hesitation. It was the silence of a trapped animal calculating its escape route. "We did what we had to do," my father said. His voice was hard now. Gone was the concern. "You forged my signature." I said, "You dated it 2 weeks before the surgery. You lied about the emergency." "We signed it for you," my mother burst out. "You were so overwhelmed. Bella. You were sick. You were in pain. You told us to handle things. Do you remember that? You said, 'Mom, Dad, please just take care of everything.' I meant drive me to the hospital." I screamed. "I did not mean sell my house. You gave us verbal permission," my father said, his voice dropping to a lawyerly register he had no right to use. "You authorized us to act in your best interest. We just formalized the paperwork because you were incapacitated." "Formalized," I laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. "You committed a felony. We saved you." My mother yelled, "Why can you not see that we saved you from making a mistake? You were drowning in that condo. The fees, the taxes. It was too much for you. We liberated you. Liberated me. I owned it. It was mine. It is family money." My father roared. "It all comes from the same pot in the end. We helped you buy it, didn't we? We helped you with the down payment. You gave me $5,000 as a gift 3 years ago." I said, "The other $50,000 was my savings." "It is all the same," he insisted. "We are a family unit. We make decisions as a unit. You are acting like a stranger, like an enemy. I am an enemy." I said, "If you are the people who rob me, then yes, I am your enemy." I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the phone between the seats. I needed to find somewhere to go. The hotel was burning through my credit card, and I had no idea when or if I would see the money from the sale. I called Sarah. Sarah was the friend who was supposed to drive me to surgery before my parents hijacked the plan. She worked in accounting at my firm. She was practical, loyal, and terrifyingly organized. "You are staying with me," she said immediately when I told her, "Do not argue. I have a guest room. It has a lock." I drove to the condo one last time to get my things. I knew I shouldn't. I knew legally I had no right to be there, but I needed clothes. I needed my laptop charger. I needed to see it. I parked down the street, afraid to be seen in my own driveway. I still had my key. I walked up to the building, my heart hammering. The fob worked on the front door. I took the elevator up to the 4th floor. I reached my door. Unit 404. I slid my key into the lock. It didn't turn. I tried again, jiggling it, pulling it back a fraction of an inch. Nothing. They had changed the locks. I stood there in the hallway, staring at the brushed metal knob. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator inside. My refrigerator. I could picture the living room, the way the light hit the bookshelf at this time of day. "Excuse me." I turned around. A man was standing at the end of the hall. He was wearing a polo shirt with a logo I didn't recognize. He held a clipboard. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I live here," I said automatically. "Not anymore," he said. He walked toward me. "You must be Ms. Perez." "Yes, I am the property manager for Obsidian Holdings," he said. "We took possession yesterday. You are trespassing. I need my things." I said, "My clothes are in there. My furniture. Anything left in the unit at closing conveys to the buyer unless specified in the contract." He said. He sounded bored, like he recited this script 3 times a week. "The unit was sold as is, fully furnished." "That is theft," I said. "That is the contract," he said. "Look, I don't want to call the police, but you need to leave. If you come back, we will file charges for criminal trespass." I looked at the door one last time. I thought about kicking it in. I thought about screaming. But I was 1 week post-op. I was weak. I was alone. I turned and walked to the elevator. I did not cry. I was done crying. I was moving into a cold, hard place inside myself where tears did not exist. I went to Sarah's house with nothing but the gym bag I had packed for the hospital and the clothes on my back. Sarah gave me a glass of wine and a hug that lasted for a long time. Then she left me alone in the guest room. I sat on the bed and opened the folder Elena had given me. I opened the file I had stolen from the title company. I needed to understand the timeline. I pulled up my medical records on my phone. The hospital had an online portal where you could see test results and visit summaries. I scrolled back to the day of the surgery. January 30th, pre-op nursing notes. 6 o'clock. Patient arrived. 6:30. Vitals taken. 07:15. Anesthesiologist consult. 07:30. Visitor Margot Perez in room. Visitor Dennis Perez in waiting area. I stared at the timestamp. 7:30. I remembered them being there together. I remembered them flanking the bed, but the log said my mother was alone with me. I closed my eyes and tried to force my memory to work. The drugs had made everything soupy. But I remembered the camera shutter. I remembered the clipboard. Where was my father if he was in the waiting area? He wasn't witnessing the signature, but the POA required 2 witnesses in addition to the notary. I looked at the forged POA again. Witness 1, Dennis Perez. Witness 2, illegible scribble. If he wasn't in the room, he couldn't have witnessed it. But then I realized something sicker. The POA was dated January 14th. The hospital log was January 30th. They were mixing up their lies. I spent the next 2 days in Sarah's guest room, turning it into a war room. I taped the timeline to the wall. January 14th, date unforged. POA, January 30th. Surgery, date of deed transfer, February 7th. Discovery. Elena called me on the 3rd day. We filed the emergency notice. She said, "We got a temporary restraining order. Obsidian Holdings cannot sell the unit for 14 days. Thank God." I said, "Do not celebrate yet." She said. The judge was skeptical. Obsidian's lawyers are already claiming they are bona fide purchasers. That means they bought it in good faith and had no idea about the fraud. If the judge believes them, they might get to keep the condo, and you will be left suing your parents for the money, which is gone, I said. Likely. She said, "I did some digging on Obsidian Holdings. It is a shell company registered in Delaware. But the principal behind it is a guy named Marcus Vane. He is a flipper. He buys distressed properties, puts a coat of paint on them, and sells them for a 20% markup within a month. He moves fast. He threatened to arrest me for trying to get my clothes. I said, he is aggressive." Elena agreed. But here's the interesting part. Vane has bought 3 other properties in Larkhaven in the last year, all of them from elderly people or estates, all of them using the same title company, the one my parents used. Exactly. It is a ring. I said, "My parents aren't just thieves. They are working with professionals. It looks like it." Elena said, "And that brings me to the other thing. What other thing?" I searched the county records for any other instruments involving the Perez Family Management Trust. And there is nothing recorded in the county under that trust name recently, but I found a reference to it in an old tax filing linked to your social security number. My social security number, Bella, Elena said, her voice serious. "I think you need to go through your old emails. Search for the word trust. Search for anything your parents sent you to sign. I have a feeling this condo sale was just the harvest. The seeds were planted a long time ago." I hung up and opened my laptop. I had had the same email address since college. It was a chaotic archive of promotional newsletters, work correspondence, and family updates. I typed trust into the search bar. Hundreds of results. Most were irrelevant. Trust the process. In God we trust. I narrowed it down. From Mom, from Dad. The list shrank. I scrolled back. Past the wedding photos of cousins I didn't like. Past the guilt trip emails about missing Christmas. I stopped at an email from 8 years ago. I was 25 then. Subject: quick signature needed. Trust update. Date March 12, 2018. I opened it. "Hi, honey. Dad and I are updating our estate planning to make sure you are taken care of if anything happens to us. We need you to sign this acceptance form for the family trust. It just lists you as a beneficiary so we can avoid probate. It is harmless. Just a formality. We will bring a copy to dinner on Tuesday. Love you." I remembered that dinner. We had gone to an Italian chain restaurant. I had just gotten a promotion at my first job. I was happy. I was trusting. My father had slid a paper across the table between the breadsticks and the salad. "Just sign here. Kiddo, it keeps the government out of our pockets." I had signed it. I hadn't read it. Why would I read it? They were my parents. They were giving me money. Supposedly. I clicked on the attachment in the email. It was a scanned copy of the blank form. Beneficiary acceptance and power of appointment. I read the legal text now, with eyes that had been sharpened by betrayal. It wasn't just a beneficiary form. It contained a clause about assets held in constructive trust. I forwarded it to Elena. 5 minutes later, she called me back. "Bella," she said, "you need to come to my office." Now. When I sat down in her office this time, Elena looked angry. Not at me. For me. "That document you signed when you were 25, she said, "it didn't just make you a beneficiary, it made you a trustee of a subtrust." "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, turning her monitor so I could see it, "that your parents have been using your identity to hold assets for years, probably to hide them from creditors or tax liability." She pointed to a diagram she had drawn on a whiteboard. "If the trust exists," she said, "and if you are a trustee, then anything in that trust legally belongs to you, or at least, your name is on the deed." "Okay," I said. "But what is in the trust?" Elena slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a printout from a property data aggregator. "This?" she said. I looked at the paper. It was a photo of a small white house with a sagging porch and overgrown hedges. It looked like a place that had been forgotten by time. Address 442 Oak Street. Marrow Glen. Owner Bella Perez. Trustee of the Perez Family Management Trust. I stared at the photo. "I own a house," I whispered. "According to the county recorder." Elena said, "You have owned it for 8 years. Marrow Glen was a working-class neighborhood on the other side of the city. I had never been there. Why, I asked. Why would they buy a house in my name and never tell me?" Elena took off her glasses. "Because if they go bankrupt, the bank can't take it," she said. "Because if they get sued, the lawyers can't touch it. They used you as a human shield. Bella, they built a bunker, put your name on the door, and didn't give you a key." I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the arms of the chair. It wasn't just the condo. The condo was just the cash cow they slaughtered when they got desperate. This was systemic. They had constructed an entire alternate reality where I was a property mogul, a landlord, a financial participant in schemes I knew nothing about. "Bella," Elena said softly, "if they sold the condo because they needed money fast, that means they are in trouble. And if they are in trouble, they might try to liquidate this house too. They can't." I said, "They need me to sign. They forged your signature once." Elena reminded me. "They will do it again." I stood up. The room spun, but I locked my knees. "I want to see it," I said. "The house." "Yes, I want to see the house I have owned for 8 years. Elena nodded. She wrote down the address. "Be careful. Bella, if they are hiding this, there is a reason. You don't know who or what is inside that house." I took the paper. I didn't care what was inside. I was done being the person things happened to. I was done being the daughter who signed the paper between the breadsticks. I walked out of the office. I got into my car. I typed 442 Oak Street into the GPS. It was a 30-minute drive. I drove with the radio off. I drove toward the unknown, toward the secret life my parents had built on the foundation of my ignorance. I was going to find out who I really was, and then I was going to burn their version of me to the ground. The basement of the county recorder's office was a place where time went to calcify. It smelled of damp paper and the metallic tang of old filing cabinets, while Elena Ross filed subpoenas from her high-rise office, sending formal demands into the legal void. I needed to touch the evidence with my own hands. I needed to see the ink. I stood at a viewing terminal, the fluorescent lights humming overhead like a headache. My abdomen throbbed in time with the flicker. I was 10 days post-op, and every movement felt like a negotiation with my own body. But I had taken the painkillers, wrapped a compression binder around my midsection, and driven myself here because waiting for PDFs was no longer an option. I typed my name into the search field again, Bella Marie Perez. I filtered by date, scrolling back past the fraudulent sale of my condo, past the original purchase deed from 3 years ago. I kept going. Elena had said 8 years. The screen refreshed. Grant deed. Recorded March 15, 2018. Grantee Bella Marie Perez. Trustee of the Perez Family Management Trust. Property address, 442 Oak Street. Marrow Glen. I stared at the entry. It was real. It wasn't a glitch or a misfiled tax return. It was a house. I requested the physical file. The clerk, a man with heavy eyelids who looked like he hadn't seen the sun in a decade, handed me a microfiche slide. I loaded it into the reader. The deed appeared on the illuminated glass. I traced the signature line with my finger. Margot Perez, grantor, Dennis Perez, grantor. They had transferred the property into the trust. They had bought it for $80,000 cash, according to the transfer tax declaration, and put it in my name. $80,000. 8 years ago. I sat back in the hard plastic chair. 8 years ago. I was 25. I was driving a used Honda with a broken air conditioner. I was eating ramen to save for a deposit on an apartment. I was stressing about student loans. And all that time, my parents were sitting on a paid-off house in Marrow Glen, with my name on the title, and they had watched me struggle. They had watched me count pennies while they played Monopoly with my identity. I printed the document. The paper was warm when it came out of the machine. I folded it into my purse, right next to the bottle of ibuprofen. I walked out to my car. The sun was blinding. I put on my sunglasses and typed the address into my navigation system. Marrow Glen. It was a neighborhood on the eastern edge of the city, a place of small, post-war bungalows and chain-link fences. It wasn't dangerous, but it was tired. It was the kind of place where people parked work trucks on the lawn and Christmas lights stayed up until March. The drive took 40 minutes. As I crossed the city limits, the manicured medians of Larkhaven gave way to cracked sidewalks. I turned onto Oak Street. It was quiet. A dog barked rhythmically from behind a fence. I slowed down, counting the house numbers. 438, 440. I pulled over to the curb and cut the engine. The house was small, a single-story ranch with white siding that was turning gray with grime. The roof shingles were curling at the edges like burnt paper. A massive, overgrown hedge swallowed the front porch, blocking the windows from the street. The grass was knee-high, choked with dandelions. It looked abandoned. It looked like a rot in the middle of the block, and it was mine. I got out of the car. The wind blew a discarded fast food wrapper across the driveway. I walked up the cracked concrete path. The mailbox was jammed shut, rusted at the hinges. I stepped onto the porch. There was a cheap brass number plate nailed to the siding, 442. I tried to peer through the front window, but the blinds were drawn tight. I walked around the side of the house, my boots crunching on dead leaves. The backyard was fenced, the gate locked with a heavy padlock. Who are you? I spun around, wincing as my stitches pulled. An elderly woman was standing on the other side of the chain-link fence in the neighbor's yard. She was holding a garden hose, eyeing me with suspicion. She wore a floral housecoat and a sun visor. "I am the owner," I said. The words felt strange in my mouth. Alien. The owner. She squinted at me. I thought the Perez couple owned this place. My heart skipped a beat. Mr. and Mrs. Perez, I asked. Margot and Dennis. Yeah. The older couple. Nice folks, mostly. They come by once a month or so. They come here, sure, to check the pipes, pick up the mail. They never stay long. The woman, she usually goes inside for 10 minutes. Then they leave. Did they ever mention a daughter, I asked? The woman frowned. No, they said they were holding on to it as an investment rental. Said they were waiting for the market to turn. Are you a relative? I am Bella. I said, I am their daughter. Well, you look like her, the woman said, relaxing her grip on the hose. Except you look tired. I am tired, I said. I looked back at the house. My parents came here once a month. For 8 years. They drove 40 minutes to this overgrown shack, walked inside, and left. Why? What was in there? I tried the front doorknob. Locked. I knocked. The sound echoed, hollow and dusty. I walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the house one last time. It didn't look like an investment. It looked like a storage unit. It looked like a tomb. I started the car. I wasn't going back to Sarah's. I was going to the source. My parents' house in the suburbs looked exactly the same as it had the day I walked out. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. The flower beds were weeded with obsessive precision. I parked in the driveway behind my father's sedan. I walked up the path, the folder of documents tucked under my arm like a weapon. I used my key to open the front door. They hadn't changed the locks here. They probably thought they didn't need to. They probably thought I would come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. I walked into the foyer. The house was silent. "Hello," I called out. I heard a scramble from the kitchen. My mother appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face went slack when she saw me. "Bella," she breathed. "Oh, thank God. You came home." She took a step toward me, arms opening for a hug. I held up a hand. "Stay there." She froze. "Dennis," she called out, her voice trembling. "Dennis, she is here." My father emerged from the den. He looked older than he had a week ago. His shoulders were slumped, his face gray, but when he saw me, his eyes hardened. "So you are done with the tantrum?" he asked. "You are ready to stop this nonsense with the lawyers?" I walked past them into the living room. I threw the folder onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy slap. "What is this?" my father asked, staring at the folder. "Open it," I said. He looked at me, then at the folder. He sat down on the sofa and opened it. My mother hovered behind him, peering over his shoulder. I watched their faces. I watched the blood drain from my mother's cheeks. I watched my father's jaw clench. They were looking at the deed to 442 Oak Street. "Where did you get this?" my father asked. His voice was quiet, dangerous. "Public records," I said. "Just like the condo sale. Just like the fake power of attorney." "Bella." "Honey." My mother started, her hands fluttering nervously. "Do not honey me," I said. "I own a house in Marrow Glen. I have owned it for 8 years. You put it in a trust with my name on it. You never told me." "Why, it is nothing," my father said, closing the folder. "It is just a scrap property. An investment. An investment." I laughed. "It is a wreck. The neighbor says you go there once a month. You told her you were the owners." "We are the managers," my father snapped. "We manage it for you." Why, I screamed. Why keep it a secret? Why let me live in a studio apartment eating rice and beans when I legally owned a house? Why forge my signature on my condo when you had this asset? Because you would have panicked, my father shouted, standing up. "Panic about what? About owning property, about the responsibility," he yelled. "You were 25. You were a child. You couldn't handle the taxes. You couldn't handle the liability. We did it to build a safety net for you, a future. We wanted to surprise you when the market went up." "Stop lying," I said. "You sold my condo for cash because you were desperate. You have a secret house across town. This isn't a safety net. It is a shell game." My mother made a choking sound. She sat down heavily on the armchair and put her face in her hands. "Tell her. Dennis," she sobbed. "Just tell her. She knows too much." My father glared at her. "Margot, shut up. Tell me what I asked." Stepping closer, my mother looked up. Her mascara was running. She looked terrified. "It wasn't our money," she whispered. "What?" "The money to buy the house in Marrow Glen." She said, "It wasn't ours. It was from Aunt Lydia." "Aunt Lydia." I frowned. "My grandfather's sister. She died 10 years ago. She left you money." My mother said, tears streaming down her face. "She left you $50,000. But she put conditions on it. She didn't trust us. She said we were bad with money." My father turned away, looking out the window. She put it in a trust, I asked. Yes, my mother said. She made us trustees until you turned 30. We were supposed to give it to you then. I turned 30 3 years ago. I said, we spent some of it. My father said, he didn't turn around. We had bills. The business was slow. We borrowed against it. We bought the house in Marrow Glen to try and flip it, to make the money back before you found out. But the market crashed in that neighborhood. We got stuck with it, so you hid it. I said, you stole my inheritance, bought a lemon of a house, and then hid it for 8 years. We were going to fix it up, my mother insisted. We were going to sell it and give you the check. We just needed time. And the condo, I asked? Why sell the condo? Because the taxes on the Marrow Glen house were overdue, my father said. He turned back to me, his eyes pleading. The county was going to auction it off. If they auctioned it, the trust would be audited. They would see we raided the funds. We would go to jail. Bella, we needed cash to pay the back taxes and clean up the mess. I stared at them. So you sold my home, my actual home, to cover up the theft of my inheritance. We did it to protect the family, my father said. If we go down, it all goes down. Your reputation, our business, everything. I felt a coldness spreading through my chest. It was the death of hope. Until this moment, I think a tiny part of me still wanted to believe there was a misunderstanding, that there was a noble reason, but there was no nobility here, just greed and incompetence. You didn't do it to protect the family. I said, you did it to protect yourselves. Bella, please, my mother begged. We can fix this. Just drop the lawsuit. We will sell the Marrow Glen house. We will pay you back every cent. Just give us time. I looked at the folder on the table. I don't believe you, I said. I turned and walked to the door. Bella, my father shouted, if you pursue this, you will ruin us. Do you hear me? You will put your own parents in prison. I opened the door. You put yourselves there, I said. I am just turning on the lights. I drove back to Sarah's house in a daze. My body was screaming in pain. I had been standing and shouting for 20 minutes, and my incision felt like it was on fire. I collapsed onto the guest bed. Sarah came in a moment later with a glass of water and a bottle of pills. You look like hell, she said. They admitted it. I said, they stole an inheritance from my aunt. They bought the house in Marrow Glen to hide the money they skimmed. They sold my condo to pay the taxes on the secret house so they wouldn't get caught. Sarah sat down on the edge of the bed. Jesus, Bella, that is sociopathic. It is pathetic. I said, it is small and sad and pathetic, but my gut told me it wasn't the whole story. Why? Because $50,000 from Aunt Lydia didn't explain the level of desperation. You don't commit a major real estate felony involving a mobile notary and a shell company just to cover up a tax bill on a shack worth $80,000. The math didn't work. The risk outweighed the reward. There was something else. I grabbed my laptop. I wasn't done digging. I went to the state judiciary website. I searched for Dennis Perez. Civil records. The list populated. Perez versus City of Larkhaven. 2015. Traffic. State versus Perez 2018. Code violation. Then, near the top. North Star Lending Vaz. Perez Logistics Inc. and Dennis Perez. Filing date, November 12, 2025. Status active. Cause of action, breach of contract. I clicked on the case summary. Plaintiff alleges defendant defaulted on a commercial bridge loan in the amount of $250,000. Plaintiff seeks judgment for principal, interest, and legal fees. $250,000. My father's logistics business. He had always told me it was steady. Slow but steady, he would say. He was being sued for $250,000. I scrolled down. Writ of attachment filed January 5th, 2026. They were coming for his assets. That was the trigger. The lawsuit was closing in. If he lost, they would take everything. They would take his house. They would take his car. But they couldn't take my condo, unless he sold it first and hid the cash. The condo sale wasn't about the Marrow Glen taxes. That was a lie to cover a bigger lie. The condo sale was a liquidity grab. He needed $400,000 cash to settle the lawsuit or hide the money offshore before the judgment hit. He had sacrificed my home to save his failing business. My phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "This is Bella." "Hi, Bella." A woman's voice purred. "This is Brenda Sipes." The name sounded familiar. I racked my brain. "I am the real estate agent who handled the sale of your unit at the lofts," she said. The voice was sweet, syrupy, with a razor blade hidden in the sugar. "How did you get this number?" I asked. "Your father gave it to me." She said, "Look, honey, I am calling because I heard there is some confusion about the closing. I just wanted to reach out and clear the air." "There is no confusion," I said. "It was fraud. Now, let's not use ugly words," Brenda said. Her tone dropped an octave. "I have the paperwork right here. I have a seller affidavit signed by your attorneys in fact. Everything is clean." "Bella?" "My attorneys in fact were unauthorized." I said, "The power of attorney was forged." Brenda laughed. A light, airy tinkle. "That is a heavy accusation. You know, making this messy is going to hurt your family more than anyone. Do you really want to drag your parents through a criminal investigation? They are good people. They were just trying to help you." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It is advice," Brenda said. "Obsidian Holdings is a very serious company. Mr. Vane does not like complications. If I were you, I would take the check your parents are holding for you and move on. Buy a nice place in the suburbs. Let this go. I am not letting anything go." I said, "Silence." Then the syrup was gone. "Be careful. Bella, accidents happen when people don't look where they are walking." She hung up. I stared at the phone. My hand was shaking. I called Elena immediately. "Brenda Sipes just called me." I said, "The realtor." She threatened me. Elena typed in the background. "Brenda Sipes. Okay, let me run her." A minute of silence. "Got her," Elena said. "Listen to this. Brenda Sipes has had her license suspended twice, once for commingling funds, once for undisclosed dual agency, and guess who she represents in almost every transaction? Marcus Vane, I guessed. Obsidian Holdings," Elena confirmed. "And get this, she is also the listing agent on 3 other properties that were sold by elderly people to Obsidian in the last 6 months. Bella, this is a pattern. Your parents didn't just find a realtor. They tapped into a predation ring. They are part of it," I asked. "Or they are victims who got turned into accomplices." Elena said, "Maybe they went to a hard money lender for the business debt, and the lender introduced them to Vane. We can help you get cash fast. Just sell us the daughter's condo." It made sense. It made perfect sense. "We need to escalate." Elena said, "The judge is hearing the injunction motion on Tuesday. We need to show that this notary is a ghost." I did some checking on that. I said, "Prestige Mobile Notary. What did you find?" "The website is gone." I said, "I checked it an hour ago. It is a 404 error, and the phone number is disconnected." Elena swore softly. "They are scrubbing the trail. They know we are coming. I need you to do something for me." "Bella," Elena said, "I need you to lock down everything. If they have your social security number, if they have your trust documents, they might try to open credit cards in your name. They might try to drain your 401k. I already froze my credit." I said, "Check the physical documents." Elena said, "What do they have in their house?" I thought about my old room, the filing cabinet in the study. They have everything. I said, "My birth certificate, my old tax returns, probably a spare key to the condo," which is how Vane got in so fast. "Go get them," Elena said. "If you can do it safely, I can't go back there." I said, "Not tonight. Then inventory what is missing." She said, "Make a list. We will add it to the police report." I spent the night making the list. Social security card. Passport expired. Tax returns 2018 to 2024. Spare condo key. Car title. As I wrote each item, I felt a new emotion settling over me. For the last 10 days, I had felt rage. I had felt fear. I had felt the sharp, stinging grief of betrayal. But now, looking at the list of my identity that lay in my parents' filing cabinet, I felt something else. I felt like a prop to Margot and Dennis Perez. I wasn't a person. I wasn't a daughter. I was an asset class. I was a savings bond they had matured for 33 years and decided to cash in. They hadn't just stolen my house. They had stolen my adulthood. Every time they helped me with taxes. Every time they stored my important papers. Every time they offered to handle a problem. They were tightening the leash. They were ensuring that when the day came that they needed to feed on me, I would be tied to the stake, ready for the slaughter. I touched the scar on my stomach through my shirt. It was healing. The skin was knitting back together, pink and puckered. I was healing, too. But I wasn't knitting back together the way I was before. I was growing back harder. I was growing back into something that didn't need parents. I looked at the address for the Marrow Glen house again. 442 Oak Street. My parents said it was a safety net. They said it was an empty shell. But they went there once a month. You don't visit an empty shell once a month. There was something in that house. Something they hadn't told me. Something that was worth more than $50,000. I needed to get inside. I picked up my phone and searched for 24-hour locksmith. I wasn't going to ask for permission anymore. I was the owner, and tomorrow, I was going to take possession. The locksmith was a man named Steve with grease under his fingernails and a cynicism that matched my own. He did not ask why I was breaking into a house I claimed to own. He just looked at the deed I held in my shaking hand, checked my driver's license, and fired up his drill. The sound was a screeching violation of the quiet Marrow Glen street. It was 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. The neighbors were at work, or behind their blinds, watching. "We are in," Steve said. He pushed the door open. It swung inward with a groan of disuse. I paid him $150 in cash. He handed me a set of shiny new brass keys. "Good luck, lady," he said. "You look like you need it." He left me standing on the porch of 442 Oak Street. The air smelled of wet earth and impending rain. My hand gripped the new key so hard the metal bit into my palm. This was my property. According to the county of Larkhaven, I had been the mistress of this domain for 8 years. I stepped inside. I expected emptiness. I expected a hollow shell, dusty floorboards, maybe a few boxes of my parents' hoarding. What I found was a living room that was waiting for someone to come home. It was furnished, not well, but fully. There was a floral sofa that looked like it had been pulled from a 1990s sitcom set, a coffee table with a lace doily, a television an old tube model sat in the corner, unplugged. The air was stale, thick with the smell of lemon polish and mothballs, the scent of preservation. I walked through the rooms, my boots echoing on the hardwood. The kitchen had a table set for 2. The cupboards were stocked with canned goods soup, beans, peaches all arranged with labels facing out. It wasn't a rental property. It wasn't a flip. It was a stage set. I went into the bedroom. There was a double bed made up with a quilt I recognized. It was the quilt from my childhood bed, the one with the star pattern I had slept under until I was 12. Seeing it here, smoothed out and waiting in this stranger house, made bile rise in my throat. This wasn't just financial fraud. This was psychological curation. They had built a backup life for me, a place to stash me if I failed, or if I disobeyed, or if I just needed to be put away. I sat down at the small desk in the corner of the bedroom. It was a cheap laminate piece. I pulled the drawer open. It was full of hanging files. I thumbed through them. Utilities, tax assessments, insurance. I pulled out a folder labeled in my mother's distinct, looping cursive Bella for later. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a logbook of my life, written by someone else. There were insurance policies on the house, renewed annually. There were tax receipts, but there was also a handwritten list on a yellow legal pad. 2020, renew policy. Do not use Bella's SSN, use EIN. 2021, roof repair needed. Pay cash, no permits. 2023, transfer utility to trust account. Keep Bella's name off the bill. She had managed this house with the precision of a prison warden. Every entry was a calculated move to keep the asset valid but invisible. I flipped to the back of the folder. There was a thick document clipped together. Declaration of Trust. The Perez Family Management Trust. I read through the legalese. It was dense, boring, and predatory. But then I saw a section on the third page that made me stop. Beneficiary designation, Isabella Marie Vance, herein referred to as Bella Perez. Vance. That was my mother's maiden name. I stared at the paper. Isabella Marie Vance. There was a sealed amendment attached to the back. I broke the wax seal. My parents were dramatic, even in their crimes, and unfolded the paper. It was a legal opinion from a lawyer I didn't know. Re-identity continuity. Because the subject was not legally adopted by Dennis Perez until age 5. And the original inheritance from Lydia Vance was designated to Isabella Vance. The trust acts as the bridge entity, as long as the assets remain in the trust. The subject's current legal identity. Bella Perez does not trigger automated asset discovery. I lowered the paper. I wasn't just Bella Perez. I was Isabella Vance. There was a seam in my history, a gap of 5 years before my father adopted me, and they had used that gap to hide $50,000 in a house. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had weaponized my own name against me. They knew that if I searched for Bella Perez, this house wouldn't show up easily. They knew the tax bills went to the trust. They had exploited a childhood technicality to keep me poor and controlled. I took the folder. I took the photos of the canned goods and the quilt. I locked the door with my new key. I drove straight to my parents' house. I didn't call. I didn't text. I just drove. The pain in my abdomen was a dull roar now, easily ignored. My rage was a much louder engine. I walked up the driveway. My father was in the garage, polishing his car. He loved that car. He treated it with a tenderness he had never shown me. He looked up as I approached. His face went tight. "You," he said. "We need to talk." I said. My voice was calm. It scared him. I could see the flicker of unease in his eyes. He was used to me crying. He was used to me begging for approval. He didn't know this version of me. He put down the rag. "Your mother is inside." I walked into the kitchen. My mother was chopping vegetables. She froze when I entered, the knife hovering over a carrot. "Bella," she said. Her voice was cautious. I threw the folder onto the island. It slid across the granite and hit the fruit bowl. I went to the house. I said, "I saw the canned soup. I saw my old quilt." My mother paled. "You went inside, I own it." I said, "I changed the locks. You can't get in anymore." My father walked in behind me, wiping his hands on a shop towel. "You had no right to do that." He said, "That is family property. It is titled to me." I said, "It was bought with money left to Isabella Vance." The room went silent. "You know about that," my mother whispered. "I know that you used my pre-adoption name to hide assets." I said, "I know you set up a ghost life for me in Marrow Glen. What was the plan? Were you going to move me in there when I got too old to control? Were you going to lock me away with the beans and the mothballs?" My father slammed his hand on the counter. "We were protecting you," he shouted. "You are ungrateful. You have always been ungrateful. We took you in. We raised you. We gave you a name. You gave me a name so you could erase the one that had money attached to it." I said. My father's face turned a mottled purple. "I raised you as my own. I fed you. I clothed you. And this is how you repay me. By stealing our safety net. By locking us out of our own investment. It is not your investment," I yelled back, my voice finally cracking. "It is my inheritance. If you touch that house," my father hissed, stepping into my personal space, "I will cut you off. I will cut you off from everything. You will have no family. You will be alone in that condo. Oh, wait. You don't have a condo anymore." The cruelty of it took my breath away. He was taunting me with the theft he had committed. "You are right," I said, staring into his eyes. "I don't have a condo, because you sold it. But I have the Marrow Glen house, and I have this folder, and I have a lawyer who is very interested in the tax evasion you have been committing for 8 years. My mother started to cry. It was a low, keening sound. "Dennis, stop. She knows. I am leaving." I said, "I just wanted you to know that the locks are changed, and if you try to enter the property, I will have you arrested for trespassing. I turned to go. Bella, my mother wailed. We did it for you. Everything was for you. I paused at the door. I looked back at them. A weeping woman and a raging man, standing in a kitchen paid for by years of lies. No. I said, it was never for me. It was for the version of me you wanted, the one who stays quiet, the one who stays small. I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently. It felt more final that way. Elena Ross called me an hour later. I was sitting in my car in a parking lot, staring at the rain hitting the windshield. I have news on the money. Elena said, the condo proceeds. Yes. We traced the wire. It didn't go to your parents' personal account. It went to a corporate entity called Perez Family Consulting, LLC. I have never heard of it. I said, it was incorporated 3 weeks ago. Elena said, just before the surgery. And here's the kicker, the registered agent is your father. But the operating agreement lists a generic email address, so they are hiding the cash. I said, they are laundering it. Elena corrected. They are trying to make it look like business revenue. If they just deposited $400,000 into their personal checking, the IRS would flag it. By moving it through a consulting firm, they can claim it as income, pay the business tax, and then distribute it as salary or dividends. It buys them time for what I asked. To pay off whoever is chasing them, Elena said, or to disappear. I thought about the lawsuit against my father's business. The North Star lending debt. $250,000. The math still didn't quite add up. If they owed $250, why sell a condo for $425? Why steal the extra? Unless there was more debt. Or unless they were greedy. I went back to Sarah's house. Sarah was in the kitchen, drinking wine and looking at her phone. You look like you survived a war, she said, handing me a glass. I broke into the secret house. I said, I confronted them. My dad threatened to disown me. Sarah slammed her hand on the table. Bella, you have to go public. No, I said. Why? She demanded. They are monsters. You should be on the news. You should be making a TikTok series. My parents stole my condo. It would go viral in an hour. You could crowdfund the legal fees. You could destroy them. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like vinegar. I can't. I said, why? Because they are my parents, I said softly. Sarah stared at me. Bella, they drugged you. They forged your signature. They stole $500,000. I know, I said, but if I go public, if I put their faces on the internet, they will die. My dad will have a heart attack. My mom will kill herself. I know them. They live for their reputation. If I take that away, I am killing them. So Sarah said brutally, they are killing you. It is not that simple. I said, it was the trap of the abused child. I could hate them. I could sue them. I could lock them out of a house. But the idea of humiliating them globally, of being the instrument of their total social destruction, made my stomach turn. I still wanted them to be my parents. I still wanted, in some sick, deep part of me, for them to fix it. I will fight them in court. I said, I will get my money back. But I won't feed them to the wolves. Sarah sighed. You are too good. Bella, it is going to get you hurt. It already has. I said. The next morning, the legal war escalated. Elena forwarded me a document. Response to motion for temporary restraining order. It was filed by the attorneys for Obsidian Holdings, LLC, argument. Obsidian Holdings is a bona fide purchaser for value, BFP. The purchaser had no knowledge of any alleged fraud or familial dispute. The purchaser relied on a facially valid power of attorney and a notarized deed. To void the sale now would cause irreparable harm to the innocent purchaser. Innocent purchaser. I scoffed. Reading the email, they are playing the BFP card, Elena said on the phone. It is their strongest defense. If the judge believes they didn't know about the fraud, the law tends to protect the buyer to keep the real estate market stable. They don't want every property sale to be reversible, so I lose the condo, I asked. If they win this argument, yes, Elena said. You would lose the property, and your only remedy would be to sue your parents for the money. which, as we know, is currently sitting in a shell company and likely being spent. We have to prove Obsidian knew. I said, exactly, Elena said. And to do that, we need to break the notary. The ghost. I requested the notary journal. Elena said, in this state, notaries are required to keep a journal of every signature they witness. They have to record the ID they saw. And the title company says they don't have a copy of the journal entry. Elena said, they say the mobile notary took the journal with him. That is convenient. I said, it is suspicious. Elena said, a legitimate title company usually keeps a scan of the journal entry for their own liability. The fact that they don't have it suggests they knew the notarization was dirty. We need the original power of attorney. I said, the one with the wet ink. I demanded it. Elena said, they have 3 days to produce it. If they don't, we can ask the judge for an adverse inference, basically, asking the judge to assume that because they hid the evidence. The evidence was bad for them. My phone beeped. A text message. I pulled it away from my ear. It was from an unknown number. You are making a mistake. The offer on the table is generous. If you keep digging, you might find things you don't want to see. Your parents aren't the only ones with secrets. It was Brenda, the realtor. I read the text to Elena. She is scared. Elena said, veiled threats mean we are getting close. I took a screenshot of the text. I saved it to a new folder on my laptop labeled Evidence. I opened the voice recorder app on my phone. From now on, I said to the empty room, I record everything. I spent the rest of the day transcribing voicemails. I wrote down dates. I cross-referenced the writing principles my mother had left in the Marrow Glen house with the bank statements I had managed to pull. I was becoming a forensic accountant of my own trauma. I looked in the mirror that evening. The woman staring back at me looked different. Her lines were sharper. Her eyes were less wide, less pleading. She looked like a woman who checked the exits when she entered a room. I missed the old Bella. I missed the Bella who trusted people. I missed the Bella who thought family meant safe. But she was gone. She had died on the operating table. And this cold, precise creature had woken up in her place. That night, I found the connection. I was going through the old emails again, searching for anything related to North Star Lending, the company suing my father. I didn't find North Star, but I found a thread from 2 years ago between my father and a generic email address, processingvaincap.com, as in Marcus Vane, The owner of Obsidian Holdings. The email was short. Dennis, we can extend the term on the private note, but we need more collateral. The Marrow Glen property is insufficient equity given the market conditions. What else do you have? Vane. My blood ran cold. My father hadn't just met Marcus Vane when he sold the condo. He had been borrowing money from him for years. I read my father's reply. Marcus, please, the business is turning a corner. I just need 6 months. I can't pledge the other property. It is complicated. Vane's reply. It is not complicated. Dennis, it is an asset. If you can't pay the bridge loan on the Marrow Glen leverage, we will have to call the note, or you can find us something liquid. We like downtown condos. I sat back, feeling the room spin. The Marrow Glen house, the inheritance, wasn't just a secret savings account. My parents had leveraged it. They had borrowed money against the house I legally owned, probably using the fake trust documents to authorize the loan. But the house wasn't enough. Vane wanted more. They didn't sell my condo to pay a tax bill. They didn't sell it to save the family business from a bank. They sold it because they were in debt to a loan shark named Marcus Vane, who knew they were committing fraud. Vane knew about the Marrow Glen house. He knew my father was hiding assets. He had squeezed them. Find us something liquid. We like downtown condos. My parents had traded me. They had been caught in a trap of their own, making borrowing money against a stolen inheritance, and when the shark came to collect, they threw their daughter into the water to save themselves. I looked at the date of the email, 2 years ago. They had been planning this, or dreading this, for 2 years. Every time they came over for dinner, every time they hugged me, They were calculating the equity in my walls. They were wondering when, not if, they would have to feed me to the beast. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was the last tear I would cry for them, because now I understood. It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't panic. It was a transaction. I picked up my phone and called Elena. It was 10 at night. I found the link. I said, "My father owed money to Marcus Vane long before the sale. The condo was a payoff. Send me the email," Elena said, her voice sharp with adrenaline. I hit send. Now we have them. I said, "Obsidian isn't a bona fide purchaser. They are the predator who ordered the theft. And your parents?" Elena asked, "My parents are the ones who took the order." I said, I hung up. I looked at the folder of evidence. I looked at the Marrow Glen keys. I wasn't just going to get my house back. I was going to expose the whole rot. I was going to peel back the floorboards of my family and show the world the infestation underneath. I lay down on Sarah's guest bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay awake, plotting. If Vane was the shark, and my parents were the bait, then I was the hook, and I was going to make sure they all choked on it. The court date was set for a Tuesday morning. 3 weeks after the surgery that had carved a line through my life, I was still physically fragile. My incision was a healing ridge of scar tissue that pulled tight whenever I stood too straight or breathed too deeply. But the deeper wound was the one no one could see, the one that made my hands shake as I tried to put on mascara in Sarah's guest bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. Not just sleepy, but worn down to the elemental wire. My skin was pale. My eyes ringed with dark circles that concealer refused to hide. I practiced my opening statement to the shower curtain. My name is Bella Perez. I am the legal owner of the property at 124 Main Street. My voice cracked. I tried again. I did not sign the deed. I was unconscious. It sounded whining. It sounded like a child complaining about a broken toy. I was terrified. Terrified that I would walk into that courtroom and the judge would see exactly what my parents wanted him to see, a hysterical, post-operative daughter who was confused by medication and lashing out at the people who loved her. That was their narrative. I knew it now. I had called my Aunt Rosa the night before, fishing for information. Rosa was my father's sister, a woman who usually trafficked in gossip like it was a currency. "Oh, honey," Rosa had said, her voice dripping with that specific, pitying tone people reserve for the mentally ill. "We are all praying for you. Your mom told us about the episode I had asked, gripping the phone. You know, the breakdown, the anesthesia psychosis. It happens. Bella, my neighbor's cousin thought she was the Queen of England for a week after her hip replacement. Just listen to your parents. They are so worried about you wandering off. They had poisoned the well. They had called every aunt, uncle, and cousin in the directory and told them I was crazy. They were building a firewall of concern to protect themselves from the heat of their crime. If I screamed theft, the family would hear delusion." I put down the mascara wand. I couldn't cry. Crying would make my eyes puffy. Crying would make me look unstable. I had to look like ice. I had to look like a balance sheet. I put on my sharpest blazer, a navy blue armor that hid the compression bandage around my waist. I drove to the title company again. Elena had subpoenaed the records, but subpoenas moved at the speed of law, and I needed answers at the speed of panic. I walked into the glass lobby. The receptionist recognized me. Her eyes widened, and she reached for the phone. "I am not leaving until I see the ID verification log," I said, leaning my hands on the desk. "Ms. Perez, please," she hissed. "The manager is in a meeting. I don't care. You closed a sale on my property using a forged signature. I want to see the copy of the driver's license you used to verify my identity." "Security," she called out, her voice pitching up. A young man in a uniform started walking toward me, but before he could reach me, a woman emerged from the back office. She was older, with gray hair pulled into a severe bun. She held a file. "Let her see it," she said quietly to the receptionist. The receptionist gaped. "But policy." The woman walked up to the counter. She looked at me with sad, tired eyes. "I was the closing officer," she said. I didn't handle the signing that was the mobile notary, but I processed the file. "Show me the ID," I said. She opened the file. She slid a photocopy across the marble counter. I looked down. It was my driver's license. Or rather, it was a copy of my license. The number was correct. The address was correct. But the photo, it was grainy. A black and white Xerox. But the woman in the photo? The hair was right. The face shape was right. But there was something off about the jawline. It was softer, older, and the signature at the bottom of the license. It was shaky. It wasn't me. "That is not me," I whispered. The closing officer looked around the lobby, then leaned in close. The notary said the signer was heavily medicated. She murmured. He said she was wearing a headscarf. He said she looked older than the ID, but he assumed it was the illness. She paused, then added the detail that made my stomach turn over. He said she was wearing a wig. A dark bob. I stared at her. A wig. My mother had a dark bob wig. She had bought it for a costume party 2 years ago. She kept it in the back of her closet. "Thank you," I said. My voice was hollow. I walked out of the building. The nausea was back, rolling in waves. My mother hadn't just forged my name. She had cosplayed as me. She had put on a wig, driven to a notary, and pretended to be her unconscious daughter to steal her home. I called Elena. "I need footage." I said, "The title company building, the lobby, January 14th, or January 30th, whenever the signing happened, I am already on it." Elena said, "We sent a preservation letter to the building management yesterday. We should have the files by this afternoon." I went to Elena's office to wait. I couldn't sit still. I paced the small conference room, ignoring the pain in my side. When the email came through, Elena hooked her laptop up to the large monitor on the wall. "Here we go," she said. "January 14th, the date on the power of attorney." She clicked play. The grainy security footage showed the lobby of an office building. The timestamp was 2:15 p.m. A woman walked into the frame. She was wearing a trench coat. She had a scarf wrapped around her head and big sunglasses. But I knew the walk. I knew the way she clutched her purse to her side. It was Margot Perez. She walked to the elevator bank. She was holding a manila folder. "Fast forward," Elena said. The timestamp jumped to 2:45 p.m. The elevator doors opened. Margot walked out. She was smiling. She wasn't wearing the sunglasses anymore. She was tucking the folder into her bag, and she was smiling a tight, satisfied smile, like she had just returned a defective appliance and gotten a full refund. I felt the air leave the room. "That is it," Elena said softly. "That is the smoking gun. Your mother. On the date of the forgery, at the location of the notary." I stood up. "I'm going to see her." I said, "Bella." "Wait," Elena said. "Let the police handle this." "No." I said, "I need to hear her say it. I need her to look me in the eye and tell me why she wore a wig to steal my life." I drove to the suburbs. It was raining now. A hard, driving rain that matched the violence inside my chest. I walked into my parents' house without knocking. They were in the living room, watching the news. My father had a scotch in his hand. My mother was knitting. It was a scene of domestic tranquility that made me want to scream. "Turn it off," I said. My father jumped. Margot dropped a stitch. "Bella," my mother said, her hand flying to her chest. "You scared us." I pulled out my phone. I held it up. I played the video. I watched their faces as they watched the screen. I saw my mother's eyes go wide. I saw my father's face drain of color. "You wore a wig." "Mom," I asked, my voice trembling. "You put on a costume." My mother looked at the floor. She started to cry. Silent, shaking sobs. "I had to," she whispered. "The notary. He wouldn't sign it if you weren't there. He needed to see you. So you became me. I didn't have a choice," she wailed, looking up at me. Her face was twisted with misery. "Your father, the men, they were going to hurt him." "Bella, what men?" I asked. "The investors," my father said. His voice was raspy. He took a long drink of the scotch. "Marcus Vane?" I asked. He looked at me sharply. "You know the name." "I know he is a loan shark." I said, I know you borrowed money from him years ago. He wasn't a shark at first, my father said. Staring into his glass, he was a private equity guy. He lent me operating capital when the bank said no. But the terms, the interest, it compounded. It got out of control. So you gave him my condo to make it stop. He demanded it. My father said, he knew about the Marrow Glen house. He knew we had hidden it in the trust. He threatened to expose us to the IRS if we didn't pay him off. And the price I asked, $425,000. My father flinched. He didn't pay that. Did he? I asked. He paid $350,000. My father whispered. I felt like I had been punched. You sold it for $75,000 under market. We needed the cash that day. My father shouted. He offered an immediate wire transfer. No inspection, no contingencies. We had to take it. We told the title company $425 to make it look like a fair market transaction so you wouldn't suspect. But he only wired $350. And where is the money? I asked. The $50,000 that was left after the mortgage payoff. It is gone. My mother sobbed. We paid the back interest. We paid the penalties. There is nothing left. Bella, it is all gone. I stared at them. They had burned my equity. They had burned my home, and they had nothing to show for it but a temporary reprieve from a predator they had invited into our lives. And the Marrow Glen house, I asked. My father looked away. That is collateral for the rest, he said. The rest, we still owe him, my father said. The $350 only covered the arrears and the penalties. We still owe the principal on the original business loan, the Marrow Glen house. He has a lien on it. If we don't pay him another $100,000 by June, he takes that too. I laughed. It was a dry, broken sound. So you didn't save anything, I said. You just fed him an appetizer. We bought time, my father insisted. We can fix this. I have a deal coming through in March. Big logistics contract. I can pay him off. I can buy your condo back. Just give us time. You don't have time, I said. I have a court hearing on Tuesday. You can't go to court, my mother begged. Reaching for my hand, I snatched it away. Bella, please, if you testify, if you show that video, they will arrest me. I forged a document. That is prison. Bella, do you want your mother in prison? I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had nursed me through chickenpox, the woman who had taught me to read, and the woman who had worn a wig to steal my future. I don't want you in prison, I said, but I'm not going to be homeless to keep you out of it. I turned to leave. Bella, my father shouted, if you do this, you are dead to us. I am already dead to you. I said without turning around, I died the minute you decided I was worth less than your debt. I drove back to the city. I felt lighter, in a terrifying way. The mystery was gone. There were no more shadows. Just the ugly, hard truth of math and cowardice. I met with Elena the next morning. I told her everything. The wig, the $350 sale price, the remaining debt. Elena rubbed her temples. This is a mess, she said, but it gives us leverage. How if Vane paid under market value and falsified the closing statement to show a higher price? That is mortgage fraud, Elena said. That destroys his bona fide purchaser defense. An innocent buyer doesn't lie about the purchase price on a HUD statement, so we can win. We can get the condo back, Elena said. But Bella, you have to understand the cost. What cost to prove this? We have to implicate your parents. We have to prove they conspired with Vane to falsify the price. That is a federal crime. If we win, Vane loses the condo, but your parents likely go to jail. I sat in the silence of the office. The choice was laid out before me like a surgical instrument tray. Option A. I drop the case. I lose my condo. I lose the Marrow Glen house eventually. My parents stay free, but they remain slaves to Vane, and I remain their victim. Option B. I burn it all down. I get my home back. My parents go to prison. I become the daughter who put them there. I closed my eyes. I thought about the quilt in the Marrow Glen house. I thought about the Bella for Later folder. They had never given me a choice. They had made all the choices for me, for years. Now, finally, I had the power. Is there a third option? I asked. Elena looked at me. What do you mean? Can we offer them a deal? I asked. A plea deal? No. A family deal. I outlined my plan. It was risky. It relied on my parents having a shred of decency left, which was a gamble, but it was the only way I could live with myself. I called my parents. Meet me at Elena's office. I said, tomorrow at 10. Bring your lawyer if you have one. They showed up alone. They looked like ghosts. My mother's eyes were swollen shut. My father looked 10 years older. Elena sat at the head of the table. I sat next to her. Here is the offer. I said. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. I pushed a document across the table. Number 1. You will sign an affidavit admitting that the power of attorney was forged and that Marcus Vane knew it. You will testify that Vane structured the sale to hide the true price. My father started to speak, but I cut him off. Number 2. You will sign a quitclaim deed transferring any and all interest in the Marrow Glen property to me. Free and clear. You will resign as trustees of the Perez Family Management Trust immediately. Number 3. You will return the $50,000 you stole from Aunt Lydia's inheritance. I know you don't have it now, but you will sign a promissory note to repay it over 5 years. And in exchange, my father asked, his voice tight. In exchange, I said, I will request that the district attorney not pursue custodial sentences for you. I will frame my cooperation with the prosecution as dependent on your testimony against Vane. I can't guarantee you won't get probation. I can't guarantee you won't lose your license or your business, but I will fight to keep you out of a cell. My mother began to weep softly. And if we refuse, my father asked. Then I play the video in court on Tuesday. I said, I show the judge the wig. I show the emails, and I let the system eat you alive. My father looked at the document. He picked up a pen. His hand was shaking. He looked at me. There was no love in his eyes, only fear and a strange, grudging respect. You have become hard, Bella, he said. I learned from the best. I said. He signed. My mother signed. They left the office without saying goodbye. I felt exhausted. I felt sick, but I also felt clean. I had cut out the rot. That night, I was at Sarah's house, packing my bag for court the next day. Even with the affidavit, I had to appear. I had to face the judge. My phone buzzed. It was a text. Unknown number. I opened it. It was a photo. It was a picture of the Marrow Glen house, taken from the street. At night, there was a figure standing in the window of the house, a shadow, and below the photo, 2 words, stop digging. I dropped the phone. The house was empty. I had changed the locks. I had the only keys. Someone was inside, and they were watching me. This wasn't just about my parents anymore. I had kicked a hornet's nest. Marcus Vane wasn't going to let his investment go without a fight. He wasn't afraid of a lawsuit. He was sending a message. I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking, but I didn't delete the photo. I forwarded it to Elena. Then I forwarded it to the police detective Elena had introduced me to. I wasn't stopping. I was just getting started. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and anxious sweat. I sat at the plaintiff's table. My hands folded in my lap to hide the tremor that I couldn't quite suppress. My incision was throbbing, a dull, hot ache that radiated from my navel to my hip, reminding me with every heartbeat that I was less than a month out of surgery. I wore the navy blazer, I wore the concealer, but I felt like a paper doll that a strong wind could blow away. The attorney for Obsidian Holdings was a man named Mr. Sterling. He looked like he cost $600 an hour. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket, and smiled at the judge with the easy confidence of a man who played golf on weekends with people who mattered. Your Honor, he began, his voice smooth and deep. This is a tragic case of family dysfunction, but it is not a case of real estate fraud. The plaintiff, Ms. Perez, is clearly going through a difficult time. She is recovering from a major medical procedure. She is under the influence of heavy painkillers. He gestured toward me, a dismissive wave of his hand. We have statements from her own family indicating a history of emotional volatility. She is confused. She regrets the sale now. Perhaps. But seller's remorse is not grounds to overturn a valid deed transfer to a bona fide purchaser. My client paid $350,000 in good faith. To block this asset now would be an injustice to a legitimate business. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. Confused. Volatile. It was the narrative my parents had planted. It was growing roots right here in the courtroom. Elena Ross stood up. She didn't have Sterling's polish, but she had something better. She had the weight of the truth. "Your Honor," Elena said, her voice cutting through the humid air, "the defense wants to talk about emotions. I want to talk about timeline. I want to talk about physics." She placed a poster board on an easel. It was a simple timeline. January 37:30. A.M. Bella Perez enters surgery. January 32, 15 p.m. A woman purporting to be Bella Perez signs closing documents at a title company across town. January 33 p.m. Bella Perez is in the recovery room. Unconscious, unless Ms. Perez has the ability to bilocate, Elena said, pointing to the chart. She did not sign that deed, and if she did not sign the deed, there is no sale. There is only theft. The judge, a woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, leaned forward. She looked at the timeline. Then she looked at Sterling. "Does the defense have an explanation for the physical impossibility of the signature?" she asked. Sterling cleared his throat. "As we stated, Your Honor, the plaintiff granted a power of attorney to her parents 2 weeks prior. They were acting as her authorized agents. The signature at closing was executed by her mother, under that authority. And where is the original power of attorney?" the judge asked. "We are locating it," Sterling said. "There was a mix-up at the title office." "A mix-up," the judge repeated flatly. Elena stepped forward. "Your Honor, we would like to call Margot Perez to the stand." My mother stood up from the gallery. She was wearing a gray cardigan I had never seen before. She looked small, frail. She walked to the witness stand like she was walking to the gallows. I watched her. This was the woman who had taught me to tie my shoes. This was the woman who had held my hair back when I had the flu. "Do you swear to tell the truth?" the bailiff asked. "I do," my mother whispered. Elena approached the stand. "Mrs. Perez," Elena said gently. "Did your daughter, Bella Perez, sign a power of attorney giving you control of her assets on January 14th? My mother looked at me. Her eyes were wet. She looked at my father, who was sitting in the back row, staring at his knees. "She agreed to it," my mother said. Her voice was shaking. "She told us to handle things." "Did she sign the document?" Elena asked. My mother hesitated. She gripped the railing of the witness box. I saw the war happening behind her eyes, the war between the lie she needed to tell to save herself and the truth that was staring her in the face, her daughter. Pale and scarred, watching her. She was sick. My mother said, "She was so stressed. We just wanted to help her." "Mrs. Perez," Elena said, her voice hardening. "Did Bella Perez put pen to paper and sign that document?" "No," my mother whispered. A ripple went through the courtroom. "Mr. Sterling stiffened. "I signed it for her," my mother added quickly, looking at the judge. "But I meant to buy it back. We just needed the money for a few months. We were going to fix it. We saved her credit move to strike." Elena said. "Sustained," the judge said. Elena turned to the audiovisual tech. "Please play Exhibit B." The screen on the wall flickered to life. It was the security footage from the lobby. I watched Margot Perez, my mother, walk into the frame. I saw the trench coat. I saw the sunglasses. I saw the dark bob wig. The courtroom went silent. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. "Mrs. Perez," Elena said, "is that you in the video?" "Yes," my mother said. She was crying openly now. "Why are you wearing a wig?" Elena asked. My mother put her face in her hands. "Because the notary needed to see Bella," she sobbed, "and Bella was in surgery." "And why are you smiling when you leave?" Elena asked. "I wasn't smiling," my mother cried. "I was relieved. I thought I had saved us." No further questions. Elena said. She sat down. I looked at the judge. Her face was unreadable, but she was writing furiously on her notepad. Elena stood up again. One more thing. Your Honor, the defense claims his client is a bona fide purchaser who paid market value. We have subpoenaed the bank records of the transaction. She held up a document. The HUD-1 settlement statement lists a sale price of $425,000, but the wire transfer from Obsidian Holdings was for only $350,000. She looked at Sterling. An innocent buyer does not falsify federal closing documents. Elena said, An innocent buyer does not pay $75,000 under the table to desperate parents in exchange for a quick deed. This was not a sale. This was a liquidation authorized by a forgery. The judge set down her pen. I am granting the temporary restraining order. She said, Obsidian Holdings is enjoined from transferring, encumbering, or selling the property at 124 Main Street until a full trial on the merits can be conducted. She looked at Sterling. And Counselor, she said, her voice icy, I suggest you advise your client that the court takes allegations of mortgage fraud very seriously. I am referring the transcript of this hearing to the district attorney's office. Court is adjourned. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. I sat there for a moment, unable to move. We had won. At least, we had won the battle. The condo was safe for now. But as I stood up, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sick. I walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was crowded with people from other cases. I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. Ms. Perez. I looked up. It was Brenda Sipes, the realtor. She was wearing a bright yellow suit. She looked like a canary that had just eaten a cat. She wasn't smiling. That was a very dramatic performance, she said. I looked at her. Get away from me. Brenda. She stepped closer. She smelled of expensive perfume and rot. You think a piece of paper from a judge stops men like Marcus Vane? She asked quietly. Her voice was calm, conversational. It stops him from selling my house. I said, for now. Brenda said, but houses are fragile things. Bella. They have pipes that burst. They have wires that spark. They have insurance policies that get canceled. Are you threatening me? I asked. I am educating you, she said. You are playing a game you don't understand. You think this is about you and your mommy and daddy. It isn't. It is about capital. Marcus Vane has moved more money in a week than you will earn in your life. Do you really think he is going to let a little girl with a forgery story keep his asset? It is not his asset, I said. It is mine. She smiled then. It was a cold, dead smile. There are so many ways a woman can lose a house. Bella. Foreclosure is just the polite way. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. I watched her go. I felt a chill that went deeper than my bones. Elena was right. My parents were villains. Yes, but they were just the doormat. I had just wiped my muddy boots on the people who owned the building. I walked out to the parking lot. My parents were waiting by my car. They looked like refugees. My mother was clutching her purse. My father was smoking a cigarette, his hand shaking. Bella, my mother said when she saw me. I stopped 10 feet away from them. I don't want to hear it. I said, we did what you asked. My father said. He threw the cigarette on the ground and crushed it. We signed the affidavit. We testified. You told the truth. I corrected him. For the first time in your lives, we are ruined, my mother said. The judge referred it to the DA. They are going to charge us. That is out of my hands. I said, you can stop it, my father said. He took a step toward me. You can tell them you don't want to press charges. You can tell them it was a family misunderstanding. If you don't cooperate, the case falls apart. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had raised me. The man who was supposed to protect me from the monsters, not sell me to them. I am not going to lie for you. I said, not anymore. Bella, please, my mother begged. Just take the Marrow Glen house. Sell it. Keep the money. Let Vane have the condo. Let this go. If you keep fighting, they will destroy us all. I laughed. It was a harsh sound. Take the Marrow Glen house, I asked. The one Vane has a lien on, the one you leveraged to the hilt. It is worthless. Mom. It is a trap. It has equity, she insisted. It has a target on it. I said, I opened my car door. I am done. I said, I am done being your retirement plan. I am done being your collateral. My father's face twisted. You are abandoning your family, he shouted. After everything we did for you. We built you. Bella. We paid for your school, we paid for your braces. We made you who you are. I froze. I turned back to him. Say that again, I said softly. We made you. He spat. You are ours. Your success is our success. Your credit is our credit. You don't get to just walk away with the assets we helped create. The truth hung in the air between us. It was ugly and naked. They didn't love me. They owned me. To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was a subsidiary company. They had invested in me. And now they were angry that I was refusing to pay dividends. You are right. I said, you made me. I got into the car. I rolled down the window. But I am under new management now. I drove away. I watched them in the rearview mirror. Two small figures standing in the gray parking lot. Shrinking until they were gone. I didn't go back to Sarah's house. I drove to Elena's office. I need to sign the papers. I said when I walked in. Elena looked up from her desk. Which papers? The protective trust. I said, for the Marrow Glen house, but you said it was worthless. Elena said, you said Vane has a lien on it. He thinks he does. I said, but I checked the recording dates. The lien was filed against Dennis and Margot Perez. But the house is titled to Bella Perez, trustee. The names don't match. The lien is defective. Elena's eyes widened. Are you sure I am sure? I pulled the title report myself. If I move the house into a new trust, a trust with a different name, a different beneficiary, and I do it before Vane corrects his filing, then his lien might not attach. Elena finished. He would have to sue you to get it. Exactly, I said. And while he is suing me, I will be reporting him to the State Banking Commission for predatory lending and mortgage fraud. I picked up the pen. I signed the deed transferring 442 Oak Street into the Phoenix Trust. I handed the paper to Elena. File it, I said. Today, she nodded. And the evidence. The recordings. The emails. I pulled a USB drive out of my pocket. Send it. I said, send it to the Attorney General. Send it to the FBI. Send it to everyone. Bella, Elena warned, once we do this, there is no going back. This isn't just a lawsuit anymore. This is a criminal war. Vane will come for you. Let him come. I said. I left the office. The sun was starting to set. The city was turning purple and gold. I felt strange. I felt empty. But it was a clean emptiness. I had severed the limb to save the body. I got into my car. I had one more stop to make. I drove to Marrow Glen. I needed to secure the house. If Vane knew I was making a play for it, he might try to take it by force. I needed to get the Bella for Later folder. I needed to get the evidence of my mother's tax evasion. I needed to make sure the property was locked down. I turned onto Oak Street. The streetlights were flickering on. The house sat in the gloom, the hedges casting long, spider-like shadows across the lawn. I pulled into the driveway. I saw it immediately. The back gate. The one with the heavy padlock. It was open. The padlock was gone. The wood around the latch was splintered. I killed the engine. I reached under my seat and pulled out the heavy flashlight I kept there. It wasn't a weapon, but it was heavy enough to feel like one. I walked up the driveway, my heart hammering against my ribs. I stepped onto the back porch. The back door was ajar. Just an inch. A sliver of darkness. I pushed it open with my foot. Hello, I called out. Silence. I stepped inside. The kitchen was empty. The table was still set for two. The canned peaches were still on the shelf, but something felt wrong. The air felt disturbed. I walked into the living room. The TV was still in the corner. I walked into the bedroom. I looked at the desk. The drawer was open. I ran to it. Empty. The hanging files were gone. The folder labeled Bella for Later was gone. The insurance policies, the tax receipts, the handwritten list of crimes, all gone. I spun around, shining the flashlight into the corners of the room. Nothing else was touched. The quilt was still on the bed. The cheap lamp was still on the nightstand. This wasn't a robbery. Thieves took TVS. Thieves took jewelry. Thieves didn't take 20 years of tax records and leave the silver. I walked back to the kitchen. I looked at the back door. There was a piece of paper taped to the glass. I shined the light on it. It was a printout of the photo I had received the night before. The photo of me standing in this house. And below it, new text. We told you to stop digging. Now we are filling the hole. I stared at the paper. They hadn't just watched me. They had been here. They had been here while I was in court, while I was confronting my parents. They had cleaned the house. They had removed the evidence that linked my parents to the property, and the evidence that linked the property to the fraud. They were erasing the trail. I stepped back out onto the porch. The night air was cold. I looked out at the dark yard. The hedges rustled in the wind. I wasn't safe. I wasn't victorious. I was standing in the middle of a crime scene that had been sanitized by professionals. My parents were gone. My condo was in legal limbo. And now, my leverage was stolen. But as I stood there, listening to the wind, I realized something. They had taken the files because they were afraid of them. They were erasing the trail because the trail led to them. They thought they had disarmed me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened the Cloud Drive app. I looked at the folder labeled Backup. I had photographed every page of the Bella for Later folder the day I found it. I had scanned the tax receipts. I had recorded the list. They had stolen the paper, but they hadn't stolen the data. I smiled. It was a grim, tight smile. I walked back to my car. I wasn't Bella Perez, the victim. I wasn't even Isabella Vance, the heiress. I was the witness, and I was going to testify until the whole house came down. I started the engine and drove into the dark, not knowing where I would sleep, not knowing who was watching, but knowing, for the first time in my life, exactly who I was. Thank you for listening to My Parents Sold My $425,000 Condo While I Was in Surgery. This story was a journey into the dark side of trust and the fight for identity. I hope it kept you on the edge of your seat. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. Are you in the US, Europe, Asia, or somewhere else? If you enjoyed Bella's battle for justice, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. We have many more tales of betrayal and redemption coming soon. Share your thoughts on the ending in the comments in English. Do you think Bella made the right choice? Let's discuss.